I just find that, if you're a good artist, you're a good artist. I don't think being female by any stretch of the imagination is some kind of a handicap like some people make it out to be, when you're talking rock music. I mean, those artists that you just mentioned, like Shirley Manson and Joan Jett and Hart, I mean, I've seen most of them live, and they just nail it. They're just good musicians, and a lot of them would blow male musicians out of the water. It's just, I think it's your level of talent. The only, roadblock would be you have to have an immense amount of talent in order to be a female rock musician, because there are stereotypes that do exist about women and everything like that, and you just, I think, have to play a little bit, a lot harder, practice a lot harder, and just give them one hell of a show, in order to be taken seriously. But, that has never affected me or stood in my way, because I've always just played because I like to play, and if you don't like it, then you don't like it. That doesn't affect me, A
lot of people out there, and everybody, I guess they have their own taste in music. That's why I mentioned Janis Joplin or Shirley Manson, because these are, female rockers that really, they did their thing. You liked them, you didn't like them, they still did their thing. And they weren't so much interested in the critics, they were interested in playing their music. And that's pretty much where I see you, looking at your songs, listening to your songs, looking at your perform, that's where you're at, I think. Now we're going to swing into another interesting question. When you look at pop music, you find a lot of up-and-coming cookie-cutter types that producers, they're basically spitting these kids out just to take advantage of the time. Granted, some enjoy immediate success, no doubt about it, but the longevity factor just isn't there a lot of times. And the potential of them falling by the wayside is pretty great. Now, what are your thoughts on the topic? And the second question to that is, how do you find yourself different?
How do I find myself different from that?
Yeah, but more importantly, what are your thoughts on the topic?
Oh, okay. Well, you know what? I just think, with all the cookie cutter bands and everything, they find a certain, they're successful with one act, and then they figure that, they're going to be successful with a whole bunch of other acts that are very similar. So they'll produce them up all the same and write very similar songs, and they expect them to sell very well. And for a short time, yes, they usually do. But, that's what you were saying before. The longevity is just not there. I've heard a lot of, artists on the radio that I'm just like, didn't I hear that song before? Or, I heard it sung a little bit different.
Oh, yeah.
But,
that I agree with.
Yeah. It's strange. I was just talking about this with my songwriting partner the other day. Even all of the songs that I hear today, it's just years ago, songs, and I think that it becomes so diluted that they just don't even know what to write anymore. Like people don't even know what hooks are anymore.
Yeah, that has to do with the songwriting. When you're writing some lyric, which is more. I mean, I guess sometimes you see these songs are more geared towards doing a commercial than towards making a real song. Something, and you talk about the hook and everything. Sometimes that's all they have is the hook, and that's it. Some of these songs don't have anything, no substance, nothing.
Yeah, I totally agree, and I think that the bottom line these days is just, especially for these record companies, which are not doing very well right now. It's all about the dollar, and they just want to make a quick buck and get out. They don't really care about artist development these days. They're just trying to save their butts, if you will. Everyone's just concerned about keeping their jobs.
Yeah, well, you can't blame them, but what happens is that now this breeds opportunity for young artists that are talented to actually get out there and really do something. okay, and then the flood of all these cookie cutter talent popping out left and right, you know, I mean, things like that, and just in your case, I don't see a comparison between you and them, those types of performers. I'm not going to call them singers, but performers. You know, and I know I asked you the question, how do you find yourself different? You don't really have to go into that too much. I see the difference. I think our listeners understand the difference. You know, you just listen to your music, you are different, than that. And, you know, cause longevity, you know, you look at, let's go back in time, longevity, Led Zeppelin, The Doors, Michael Jackson. I mean, these are artists that have longevity. Elvis.
Right.
Their songs are, you hear them today and, you know, like Elvis, you think, wow, it's still being played on the radio today. Okay.
Right.
And Michael Jackson, his songs will be played on the radio in 50 years. But that's what you want as an artist, to have that longevity factor in there.
Right.
And that's that. Now, let's talk about marketability. Okay?
Okay.
Alexx, look, you have the looks, you have the attitude. If the opportunity presented itself, would you like to see yourself more mainstream, you know, like popping out on the tube or doing more commercials? I know you've done commercials in the past. I guess, maybe for our listeners, you want to get into that a little bit, and go right ahead.
Oh, sure. Well, yeah, I guess every artist, to some extent, would like to, you know, all the indie artists out there, to some extent, would probably like to become a little bit more mainstream, and I've had, you know, my chance several different occasions. You know, for example, I've done commercials, like background vocals for commercials for, you know, Almay 7-Up, Cherry 7-Up. You know, I've been in a Discovery Channel documentary. I've, you know, been in Blender and Guitar World. But yeah, of course, I'd like for it to be more frequent, of course, you know, so that I can, you know, get my music out to the masses. You know, I think specifically, you know, my target audience would be, you know, the displaced youth, if you will. So there's a lot of kids out there, you know, and adults as well that, you know, I feel could really relate to my music and derive a lot of it from it.
Okay. I think that if for any advertising executives out there, that they're looking for someone that's talented, or even TV executives that are looking for someone that's talented, that has that's something special that will attract people to watch them, they should actually look you up. And now, Alexx, you play guitar, you sing. Tell me this: how do you feel when you are actually on stage, not in the studio, not doing anything, on stage in front of an audience?
Well, when I'm on stage in front of an audience, it's totally different from, you know, real life for me, or, you know, I suppose it's real life, but, you know, when I'm just an everyday person, you know, in everyday life, I'm actually very shy and quiet, and you know, it takes a lot for me to even, you know, go out of my house because, you know, I just like to, I hole up a lot, and I'm kind of an introvert, if you will, but when I'm out on stage, it's a totally different beat. You know, I just get my guitar in my hand and I walk up there, and it's like Jekyll and Hyde. I'm nothing like I am in everyday life. You know, I just completely transform into this maniac on stage, you know. You see me writhing about and jumping around and screaming at everybody, you know. Nothing bad, of course, but you know, I'm a totally different person, you know. My parents even tell me, geez, you know, if you were halfway as extroverted as you were, you know, on stage, you probably have a lot more friends. So, but
you don't need friends, you have music.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, the friends I do have are great, but yeah, it's you know, that the on-stage experience for me, there's nothing like it, and you wouldn't recognize me, you know, every day, you know.
Well, that's good. That's your outlet to letting loose, and I think that's fantastic. And you know, for the fans that are in the audience, they're listening, they're seeing you, you're performing.